So here I'd like to introduce a concept which is the laziness. Cities tend to reuse material, to reuse structures. So here you can see how the old theater structure has been reused and some medieval houses superimposed, reusing the existing material. In this other example in Florence, so a seemingly medieval neighborhood that if we look close from the air, we can recognize here an oval. So actually this space before was a Roman amphitheatre. So that's the volume, and well, for us it's very important to understand how these structures survive, and of course even more important is the new meanings and the new uses they get with time. Coliseum in France. This is how it is now, but this example is very good so I can explain how this process of recycling happens. Well, this is what it was in the medieval times. So you can see a little bit of the Coliseum structure, but people at that time understood that this place could be reused and actually offered protection. So a small city appeared in what used to be a Coliseum because they thought it could make a good fortress. So here you see the little town with the square, church, etc., and also the turrets, watchtowers. And in the outside you can see how some other houses start slowly to eat up the Coliseum structure, so we can understand what happened to the other example we saw in Florence. This building, with the later interest in history and restoration, was brought back to its original use. All the houses were removed, and at the moment it is a bull ring in the south of France. Amphitheatre Square in Lucca, Italy. Again, a seemingly medieval square. In the context of the workshop, I will explain this as a framework for informality, for some public life to happen. So it's like an amazing public space, but seemingly medieval. If you look at it again from the air, another oval. So the place is actually remembering its past and it's reusing the structures. So the houses around the courtyard, around the square, are the actual old tribune, and the public space is the Duel Arena. A very famous example, Piazza Navona in Rome, an amazing space, huge space, perfect framework for all type of public life, from street markets, public events, etc., etc. And in this case, it's so big and so important that even institutions, like the church, took place in the church, wanted representation in this space. Once again, if we look from the air, we can start wondering why this shape. Certainly the houses around are medieval, the church is probably Baroque, but why in this very specific shape? So this is Piazza Navona 2,000 years ago. Now I'm going to introduce a completely different concept. This is Plaza Mayor in Madrid, where I live. Well, it is a very formal square, a perfect rectangle, again framework for all sorts of activities. Christmas market. In all these activities, the space has the capacity to change, so it's almost like a scenery where things happen, but it's quite neutral. Now, if we look from the air, we start wondering what is the relation between this example and the other examples I explained. Actually, what we identified is a completely different mechanism of urban evolution. It looks like this square has been actually removed from the medieval dense urban fabric. So in fact, if we look at the old documents, what we see is like a quite casual medieval square, which in the Renaissance, when the desire for more perfect geometries came back, looking back at the Roman examples, the square was superimposed to the medieval fabric, and in a very slow process, like we can see here, it didn't happen from one day to the next. It's not completed. We can see that along the years, little constructions are started. First of all, some of them were removed from the middle of the square, and slowly, throughout many generations, committing with this project, it took shape, and finally, in the 19th century, it was finished. So now we are talking about surgery, totally different mechanism, but again, what we achieve is an amazing public space. Again, I like to talk about surgery, another example in Madrid. This is the center, this is the Plaza Mayor we just saw. So what we have here is a very compact center, very dense, but at this time, late 19th century, some new neighborhoods spread there and there, and actually the center was in the middle, so somehow it was like an obstacle for circulation. So this project, what it's trying to do is to connect this neighborhood across the center, which was really, really difficult to navigate at that time, to there. Here's the center, and the new street is going to break through all that urban fabric. This is the project, which is a bit hard to see there, but if we look closely, we can see very narrow streets in the center of the city, and this, I don't know if you see it properly, but well, actually, it's a pretty large avenue breaking through the middle. Here again, in other part, and the finished project, which took shape like this. It was a process of knocking down some buildings, building new ones. Some other were just refurbished and adapted to this new use. So here we can have a look of the finished project, which to me is probably the most important and active urban space in the city, because it's not only a big avenue, it's right in the middle of Madrid, so it's absolutely covered in life and in shops, so it's a very alive space and also very nice. Here you go. This is the street going there. So now I'm going to talk about a project we did in Kosovo, in the city of Perea. This is a competition that we actually won, and now I'm going back to the abstraction to introduce some elements that are are not very related to architecture, but are able to trigger and to inspire architecture, in my opinion. So we can talk about music, and this piece in particular, which I always understood before even doing the project, before even I knew about this competition in Kosovo, I wanted to make architecture out of this. So what is this musical piece? It is just one violin and one piano, and they are playing together. So there's a very nice contrast between a very like a breaking line, but continuous, and the very kind of rhythm of the piano, like very separate notes of the piano. We can identify rhythm in the landscape. We can understand what rhythm can do in the landscape, how it can frame the city as well. Particularly this example in Scotland. This is a very old stone circle, and they were used for ceremonies and religious ceremonies and all that. Also sometimes they were burial places, but these stones were used just using rhythm of similar elements. They were used to frame spaces, to make boundaries and define spaces. Sometimes you can see that they are even very symbolic, almost like no trespassing, like there's something that it feels that you cannot go further. And in some other cases we can identify that they have some use. I will introduce a little bit the city of Perea. I think the quickest way to describe it is as a city between the mountains. So we can see this line here. This is where the mountains start. All this is the plain, very flat landscape. But suddenly here it starts going up, but in a very dramatical way. So it's very steep from this point to there. And the city is kind of trying to push itself between the valleys, kind of pushing. So we understood the mountains as very important to understand the city. The site is here. And a very important part of the brief was that we needed to define the boundary of the city in that place, because they were having problems. Some people were just doing informal settlements in the mountains, and it was becoming dangerous for earth slides. But of course, how do you define a space? This is where the rhythm and repetition breaks into the scene. And we can see here that the limit is not only one line that we are tracing in the landscape. It is marked. It becomes evident even from the distance. We wanted to draw a mark in the landscape that emphasized the limit. Another important thing for us in the brief, was the connection north-south. So the center of the city is there, and they are trying to build a network of green spaces, which at the moment finish here, where a big park is located. So what we were doing is to prolong the green into the university campus, as you will see. So in this diagram we can see more or less how the idea is resumed. The boundary of the city, new boundary, quite adapted to the topography, but also very abstract. It came from another project which had come from the music I told you about. So this is acting almost a retaining wall, to hold the ground. Behind this is impossible to build. There's this big slope, and this is allowing for a more flat development here, responding to the more urban situation at the other side. And in the middle, what we have is the park coming between both realities. Here they are, towers emphasizing the boundary, the faculties with all the university type of use, and the parking here. By the way, I think I didn't mention this, we needed, apart from the university, strictly educational buildings, we needed also to add residential use. So all these towers, which are much smaller than they look here, they are actually only 6 floors high, so they are not too big. They house the apartments for the students. So yes, we have explained a lot the boundary thing, but here the other important concept was the field, the flat part, because our project is in the exact position where the plain meets the mountain. So this is the other element we were using. So just to refresh you a little bit, this is the park I was talking about. The residents framing the city, and all this is what I call the field. All this is supposed to be like a very green corridor with parks, and we thought that it could house all sorts of uses because it's a massive space. And here we see the more educational type of buildings, which, by the way, they are kind of almost part of the field, although they are buildings, but we are talking here about something like a match building. They're like a plinth So in some parts you can almost not see the building. So they continue, the landscape continue almost on top of the buildings. And in the end, they are making like a front, like against the road. This is like a main road, and this front is responding more to the urban scale, where this is more natural. Well, this is more or less what you would see from one of the apartments, let's say. But this image is to emphasize the kind of the expressive capacity of this project to really emphasize and create a boundary, not just as a line, but as a space. And what you see here is one floor, what would be a floor of one of the towers. I don't want to stop too much here, but I think the main idea is that we are talking about shared spaces, the green corridor I talked about before, and there's a whole change between the very public and the very universal side, which is starts in the educational part, to the individual. So here there's a last shared space, there and there, where kind of more than one people obviously house this place, so it's still shared. And all this path between public and individual finishes up here, which are like little nests, bigger than a bed, but not much, where the individual has its representation. Another competition that we didn't win this one, unfortunately. School of European Education in Crete. I started the lecture talking about what remains of the cities, how the cities can remember structures, and I like to emphasize that we are really fascinated about ruins. When we look at these plans, it's obvious that the essence is still there, whereas thinking in some modern projects, once you remove the cladding, the essence of the building is almost gone. So we are quite obsessed with this, and we try to work thinking in how can we achieve something like this. Another example. So we are almost doing a ruin here. For us, the main thing to design this project was the structure, because we really believe that if the structure is the essence of the project, it has the capacity to remain. When all the ephemeral elements are gone, this will remain. The competition had strong sustainable agenda of sustainability, like any competition today, but we thought it was a bit boring just to think about sustainability in the way most people do it, like just as a technology, like some technologies you add into the building to make it sustainable. We wanted, looking back again to other examples of architecture, how people did it when this technology wasn't available. So we are looking here at the streets of Seville in Spain. What we see is a neighborhood with a very, very dense, and it was the result of the Arabic control of Spain during those years. So all these are the Arab streets, very deep, very narrow, covered with pieces of fabric, and this allowed very naturally, without any complex technology, to these streets to remain quite cold, actually, even in summer. This is more or less what we wanted to achieve, even before we had any shape in mind or any particular design. We had this. We knew that we wanted a very compact building. We knew that we wanted courtyards which could, through a very narrow and deep section, be protected from the sun. And of course, we started reading the landscape a little bit. So we identified, actually the topography was quite playful. This is the main road from which you access the school. But the plot, which is that is quite into a little valley. So this is a valley here. And well, we had like two main things in mind. One thing we needed really to sort out was the difference in level between the road and there. It was quite a jump, around 5 or 6 meters, I don't remember now. But also we had to cross a little bit the valley. So these two main elements, the solution of the edge and these elements spanning, were like the main construction elements. You can see how these very thin, long structures frame the courtyards and at the same time bridge from one side to the other. They are framing really the landscape, superimposing well, quite an abstract geometry onto the side. In order to achieve this idea of the ruin of something that remains throughout time, we can talk about geometry, but there's another thing, the material. And the way we design these walls, we thought about them like made of rammed earth, like mud, so they could blend with the landscape. As you can see here, they are almost part of the landscape, like any ruin you see today. And looking at the plan, we can identify again this is the edge, the road is up there. So we have this edge resolved. These are almost retaining walls. Your access going down there, and you can see like the walls going like against the hill at the other side, and then you get the courtyards generated, and also between both realities there's this amazing shared space between them that we can see in this image here. Now we have seen what remains. We have seen the geometry and these kind of bound to ground structures, but I need to talk about the ephemeral now. On top of the ruin, as we call it, there is this other structure arriving, and it has a completely different nature. It is light, it is made out of precast elements, not so bound to earth, and we wanted it to have this kind of changeable type of character. So what we are doing are these shells that come on top of the walls. Here you can see all the courtyards again. And actually this defines the top floor. Road, main access, and you jumped into the platform and get access to this public space. I don't know if you can see it properly, but now I can explain the other use of these very long structures spanning from side to side of the valley. Obviously they are very useful just to, in contrast to this very kind of archaic type of structures we were talking about for the ground floor. Up here we can do a very kind of systematic repetition of elements, a more rational approach, which is much needed for a school building. Another element, this square here, in contrast with this very organic type of approach, blending very much with nature, this element here was the kindergarten. We felt like the kindergarten needed to be quite protected, for obvious reasons, I think, but it needed to be independent from the rest of the school. So we make like a little fortress with this type of geometry, strong, emphasizing its closeness and its privacy. Actually, right now I'm quite unsure about this element. We have been speaking about it after the competition, and at the moment I would be much more comfortable just erasing it. You can tell me what you think afterwards. And of course, again, I must insist in what I've been talking about the whole time. In order to think achieving how to achieve this essential building that remains once all the ephemeral is gone, I need to think in the process both of construction and destruction. So I see this like, well, a first move would be dealing with this border here, retaining walls, which at the same time resolve all the circulation and all the way down to the other level. And the very abstract geometry that is landing on top of the nature, leaving a footprint. So I think here we already have the essence of the project. This footprint is already leaving a mark in the landscape which has the potential to stay. So again, for us this is what it would be in I don't know, let's say 2,000 years time, if it's not reused, which would be ideal. But this is what I wanted to explain. I want you to think back to the examples of Rome and well, this idea of memory the places have when the things are done in a proper way, let's say. Thank you.